You're standing on a wooden dock at the port of Piraeus. It's 350 BC. The sun is hot on your back. Athens is behind you, 7 miles inland, marble columns catching the morning light. The Aegean Sea is in front of you, blue and endless. A merchant ship is being loaded with grain from Sicily. Sacks are going up the plank, ropes are being tied, sailors are shouting. And somewhere on that ship, a captain named Hegestratos is walking around with a plan that has never been tried before in written history. A plan to commit the very first documented insurance fraud in human civilization. There is no State Farm agent in the harbor. There is no fine print. There is not even the word insurance yet. But there is a system, a very clever ancient Greek system called a Bottomry loan. And Hegestratos, the captain of that grain ship, is about to break it in a way that will land his business partner in front of the greatest lawyer of the ancient world. So how did the first insurance fraud case work in 350 BC? And why is the legal document that came out of it still studied by law students today, 2,300 years later? The answer involves a ship at sea, a hole cut into the hull at night, a captain who literally fell into the ocean while running from his own crew, and a courtroom speech so good that scholars have preserved it word for word since the 4th century BC. Once you understand this story, you will realize insurance fraud is not a modern industry problem. It is a problem as old as insurance itself. Let's talk about the Bottomry loan, because you cannot understand the fraud without understanding the system. In ancient Athens, long-distance shipping was extremely profitable and extremely risky. A ship could sail from Athens to the grain markets of the Black Sea or Sicily and come back with a fortune. Or it could sink in a storm and take everything with it. Nobody had the personal wealth to fund a big voyage alone. So the Greeks invented a genuinely elegant solution. A merchant would go to a lender in Piraeus and borrow money against the ship and its cargo. The interest rate was very high, sometimes 20% or 30% for a single voyage, because the risk was real. Here was the clever part. If the ship arrived safely, the merchant paid back the loan with all that interest. But if the ship sank, the entire loan was canceled. The lender absorbed the loss. This meant the lender was effectively insuring the voyage. The merchant paid a premium in the form of high interest. The lender took the risk. It was maritime insurance, dressed up as a loan, and it worked. For generations, it powered the entire Athenian trading empire. Honestly, kind of beautiful. Here's where it gets interesting. Around 350 BC, a ship captain named Hegestratos and his business partner Zenothemis borrowed a large sum against a shipment of grain. The plan was to sail from Syracuse in Sicily back to Athens and pay off the loan with the grain sale profits. But Hegestratos had a different idea. He was going to keep the grain money and cancel the loan by faking a shipwreck. His scheme was almost brilliant. Before the ship left Syracuse, he would secretly sell the grain to a buyer on shore and pocket the cash. Then he would sail with an empty or half-empty ship. Somewhere on the open ocean, in the middle of the night, he would sneak into the ship's hold and cut a hole through the hull. The ship would take on water and sink. He would jump into a small lifeboat, row to safety, and claim there had been a terrible storm. The Bottomry loan would be legally canceled. The lender would lose everything. Hegestratos would walk away with the grain money in one pocket and no debt to repay in the other. Double profit, zero risk. It was, on paper, the perfect crime. And as far as we know, it was the first time anyone had thought of it. Now here is where things get genuinely wild. The plan fell apart almost immediately, in the way that fraud plans very often fall apart. Someone was awake. The crew was on watch, as sailors always were on the ancient Mediterranean. Ancient Greek merchant ships did not sail on autopilot. There were always men awake, checking the sails, adjusting the rigging, watching the stars for direction. They heard noises coming from the ship's hold in the middle of the night. Not the noises a ship should make. The sound of tools, the sound of wood being worked. They went down to investigate. They found Hegestratos alone in the belly of his own ship with an axe or an iron tool actively cutting into the hull below the waterline. He panicked. He ran. The crew chased him across the deck of his own ship in the middle of the Aegean Sea, in the dark. Think about that for a second. A captain being hunted by his own men on his own boat. Hegestratos tried to jump into the small lifeboat that he had prepared for his escape. He missed. He fell into the Aegean Sea. He drowned. The crew, now down one captain but up one ship still floating, patched the small hole that Hegestratos had already cut and sailed the boat back to Athens without further incident. Now here is the strange part. His business partner Zenothemis was on shore in Syracuse the whole time. Zenothemis had helped plan the fraud from the start. He was the money man. He was the one who had arranged the sale of the grain. When Zenothemis heard what happened, he did not give up. He did not confess. He did not disappear. He went to Athens and filed a legal claim, saying the ship had truly sunk at sea, that the loan was truly canceled, and that he was entitled to the fraud proceeds. He doubled down. This is the point where the case entered the Athenian court system. And this is the point where one of the most famous lawyers in the ancient world got involved. Here is why all of this still matters. The lawyer who took the case against Zenothemis was Demosthenes, or at least the courtroom speech was written under his name and included in his collected works. Some historians think the actual speech may have been written by one of his students, but the tradition and the classical education standard credits the great orator himself. If you have never heard the name, Demosthenes was to ancient Greece what Cicero was to Rome, and what Abraham Lincoln was to 19th century America. He is considered by many historians to be the single greatest orator of the classical world. He wrote a courtroom speech titled Against Zenothemis, sometimes called Oration 32 in the collected speeches. The full text has survived for over 2,300 years. That makes it, by a huge margin, the oldest complete insurance fraud legal document in written history. It reads like a modern courtroom drama. Demosthenes methodically walks through the timeline. He explains the Bottomry loan. He shows the pattern of secret meetings. He points out that Zenothemis was in Syracuse when the ship left, not on board. He shows the crew testimony about the hole being cut in the hull. He explains the escape lifeboat that Hegestratos had prepared. He argues that no honest man prepares for a shipwreck before he sails. It is forensic argumentation. It is exactly what a modern American fraud investigator does today when working a suspicious claim. The tools have changed. The logic has not. So the merchant, standing on the dock at Piraeus in 350 BC, watching sacks of grain going up the plank, is watching a moment in history when human beings had already built a sophisticated insurance system and other human beings were already trying to cheat it. The system worked because the courts worked. The courts worked because men like Demosthenes were willing to stand up and lay out the truth in front of a jury of ordinary Athenian citizens. Every modern fraud investigation at Allstate, Geico, or State Farm is the direct descendant of what happened in that Athenian court. Same logic, same tools, different toga. There is a truth underneath every insurance system that has ever actually functioned. The insurance itself is only half the picture. The other half is the investigation. If people can cheat freely, the system collapses. If people cannot cheat freely, the system holds. The Greeks figured this out in 350 BC and wrote it down so carefully that we still have the receipt. Hegestratos drowned. Zenothemis lost his case in the court of public memory. Demosthenes wrote it all down. And 2,300 years later, some fraud investigator at an American insurance company is doing exactly what he did. The tools change. The pattern does not.